I just listened to every album by Van Halen, and here are my thoughts. So going into this, I knew several of Van Halen's greatest hits because I had a greatest hits CD from them when I was growing up, when I was about a teenager. I had never sat down and listened to a full Van Halen album front to back, and I didn't know any other deep cuts. So Van Halen burst onto the scene in 1978 with what is widely regarded to be their best album, the best album of their whole career, and I am not one to disagree on that. They're fun, they're bombastic, and Eddie is coming out with a new definition of Guitar Hero. I knew he was important to the guitar scene and to guitarists in general, but since I hadn't listened to Van Halen that much, I didn't understand how large his impact actually was. And with that being said, I don't think it would be an understatement to say he was the Jimi Hendrix of the next generation. He defined the guitar tone that would take hair metal but metal in general, honestly, another step forward. So we've established that their first album is their best, and it is impossible not to just get a huge dopamine hit when starting up Running with the Devil or Eruption or Ain't Talking About Love. These songs are just legendary, and they remain among the best in their entire catalog. I was also previously aware of You Really Got Me, which is a cover. Love that song, and I love Van Halen's version more than the original. I was also previously aware of Jamie's Cryin'. That one I've never actually been a big fan of, just doesn't resonate with me. Some great deep cuts here, though, are I'm the One and On Fire. I'm the One is just really catchy riff, really upbeat. On Fire is really heavy, like getting into the territory of what metalheads would consider to be classic heavy metal. It's that big of a sound. It's also impossible to not love Ice Cream Man. David Lee Roth's infectious personality just really shines and comes through on this song, and I love it. I added it onto a playlist. I know I said Van Halen 1 was their best album, but they stay on an incredibly solid career high for the next following 6 albums. So Van Halen 2, the only song I knew from this previously was Dance the Night Away, and it is one of my favorite Van Halen songs. There's some really good, I think they're deep cuts on here. I had never heard of them before, so they're deep cuts to me. These deep cuts for me were Beautiful Girls, Bottoms Up, and Light Up the Sky. Light Up the Sky is a good example of something that Van Halen does a lot that I love, which is their kind of post-solo midsection, like a little interlude right after the solo will be a lot softer and very melodic, and it's just it's a great way to instantly keep your attention in the song. They always just do a good job at it. Their following album, their third, is called Women and Children First, and the only song that I knew from this album was And the Cradle Will Rock. And this song is, of course, a great classic. This album as a whole, very similar in overall quality as Van Halen 2, meaning it's great to listen to all the way through. They're still very much on their career high, and there were 2 deep cuts that especially jumped out to me on this album. Those 2 deep cuts were Romeo Delight and In a Simple Rhyme. Romeo Delight keeps this very fast driving force that Van Halen's really good at, and then In a Simple Rhyme still has a very big arena-like sound, like an arena rock kind of sound, while toning down the energy just a tiny bit. Okay, so Fair Warning comes out next, and it's their 4th album, and this album I think is better than the previous 2, so far it is closest to how good Van Halen 1 was. I also previously only knew one song from this album, and that was Unchained, another Van Halen classic. Lots of really good songs on here, though. There's a 1, 2, 3 punch that this album opens with Mean Street, Dirty Movies, and Sinner's Swing. All 3 of these songs I thought were such a great way to open up the album. So This Is Love is another song I really liked on this album. Don't know if it's a deep cut or not, but it's just, it's really groovy, and it's another example of David Lee Roth. His voice is just so likable. His personality is just so likable in all these songs. Diver Down is next, and this is still a very good album, although I think it's the worst of the incredibly strong 7-album run that Van Halen is currently on. And that's mainly due to this album being put together in not enough time. So there are a lot of songs that are only like 1-minute interludes. There are only 4 full original songs on here, and then the rest are covers. And these originals were very good, as were the covers. I think Hang 'Em High was my favorite original on here, but, Secrets and Little Guitars were both really good songs. Then their next album, 1984, comes out in, 1984. And if anyone thought that Van Halen had gotten close to just coasting on their success, this album immediately proves them wrong. This put them right back on top if they weren't already there with hits like Jump, Panama, and Hot for Teacher. So Jump is very catchy. We all know it. I like it well enough. It's not one of my absolute favorites from Van Halen, but Panama and Hot for Teacher, I think, are still the two best songs on this album. But the whole album is an excellent listen. Of the deeper cuts on this album, I think Drop Dead Legs and House of Pain jumped out to me more than the others. But 1984 is similar to Fair Warning, another album that gets very close to encroaching on the greatness that is Van Halen 1. So now things shake up a bit, and David Lee Roth leaves the band, and they recruit Sammy Hagar as their new vocalist. So a lot of people say it's a different band. They call it Van Hagar. So Van Halen is kind of back on the defense in the way that they have something to prove now that their beloved vocalist is gone, and they release their first album with Sammy Hagar, and that is 5150. And this album is an absolute hard rock masterpiece. Sammy Hagar's voice is, while I'll concede that it has quite a bit less personality than David Lee Roth's, it has a lot more power and ferocity. I can probably put it more plainly by just saying this is my second favorite Van Halen album. So Good Enough, Get Up, Summer Nights, Best of Both Worlds, and the title track all were my favorite songs, and that is a pretty big portion of the album. Again, the entire album is just so good. But if you've been listening, I've said that Van Halen has a strong 7-album run. We have just reviewed the 7th album. And right after this, Van Halen takes a pretty immediate and continuously declining downturn. The riffs just aren't catchy anymore. The music isn't fun anymore. I don't know if David Lee Roth needed to be there in order to keep Van Halen in a more fun and light mood, or maybe just coincidentally Eddie's getting older and is not feeling the music the same way that he was before. So OU 812 comes out next, and this album is okay. Again, very sharp downturn. AFU from this album is a good song, and then Black and Blue. Those were the two highlights. The rest of the album did have some trouble maintaining my attention, and this is the best album that they will have for a very long time. So For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge comes out next, and I consider this one and OU 812 to be somewhat interchangeable. I think overall this album is a bit less solid, though. That said, Pound Cake, Pleasure Dome, and Runaround were my favorite deep cuts from this album. Right Now was also a pretty good song. So if you're in the mood for Van Halen deep cuts, those would be the 4 from this album to check out. Balance comes out next, and it starts off really strong with a song called The Seventh Seal. It's heavy, it's a little mysterious sounding, and I thought hopefully this means this album was going to be a lot better as a whole. One other pretty cool deep cut from this album was Aftershock, but the rest of the album just had even more trouble maintaining my attention than the previous ones. Side note, around this era, they do a song for the movie Twister. It's called Humans Being, and it is one of their best songs of their whole career, especially one of the best Van Hagar songs, so definitely check that out. So the next album, Van Halen 3, does not even have Sammy Hagar on it. They have a new vocalist, Gary Cherone, and this album sounded like a pretty historic flop. Oh my god, it was torture to get through. And to kind of shove more salt in the wound, it's the longest album of Van Halen's entire career. Without You was all right, Fire in the Hole was all right, but god, this album was just rough. So one album left, and thankfully and mercifully for everyone involved, this album was actually pretty good. So A Different Kind of Truth was released in 2012, and David Lee Roth is back. This album confirmed my suspicions that Eddie kind of needs David in order to keep him in check and not take himself too seriously. So Chinatown, Blood and Fire, As Is, and Stay Frosty are the best songs from this album. The choruses to Blood and Fire and As Is will not leave your head for the rest of the day after you listen to them. And Stay Frosty gives David Lee Roth another chance to do a kind of Ice Cream Man thing where he gets to lean into his persona. I'm out of time. There's my album ranking. 1 to 4 is required listening. 5 to 8 is good. Everything after that, boring.